Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. This is my first live. Hang on. Let's see if you can hear me. Hope everyone can. Hello, testing. Um, Hang on a second. I have got like my phone down here to check. This is Can you tell I'm nervous? Oh yeah, you can hear me. Wonderful. So this is my first live. I'm kind of nervous. I've never done a live before, but hi, this is me, Katie. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope everyone's had such a lovely day. It is like 10 o'clock in the morning here in Chicago, so our day is just getting started, to be honest. I have not done that much. We actually got up really early, like seven, well, about 6:30 we got up. We got up, had some nice breakfast. We had our salmon and cream cheese bagels, which is like our tradition. We always have salmon and cream cheese bagels. And then, to be honest, we just relaxed. Well, somewhat relaxed. Callum is still doing some last minute mapping. And I spent my morning, like, I'm a little bit of a geek, I'll be honest. I don't know if you can tell from my vlogs, but I spent my morning going through all of the food and like that we want for our what is this called, Christmas dinner. And I wrote down all of the timings and all of the recipes and all of the YouTube links so that I can prepare that Christmas dinner. We have quite a few dishes, like sides and stuff. And I will film all that and put it up as a vlog tomorrow. But I just kind of wanted to say, like, jump on a live today on Christmas Day, finish off Vlogmas, and say hi to everyone, and just say thank you so much for watching this Vlogmas video, like this Vlogmas series. And I hope everyone's had such a lovely Christmas. I know I'm talking to my mother-in-law at the moment, and she's over in England, so it's like she's having a Christmas dinner now. It's near the end of the day for her, and a lot of my friends over in Thailand, it's their evening and their Christmas has kind of been and gone. But like, I hope everyone just has a lovely day. And I think Christmas is such a lovely time, and we all like always feel so busy at Christmas time. We just never have time to slow down. So I just wanted to take this time to slow down a little bit and say thank you, and just thank you for everyone's love and support over the last over the last month, but especially this year. It's been a big year for us. Obviously, we've moved to Chicago last October, and it's been a funny year. Like it's had its ups and downs, and we've had some, we've had some times where we've like really worked on things that we want to do in life and like what we want to do for the next 5-10 years. Like we've come to that kind of like plan. So it's been a productive year, but it's definitely had its challenges. But yeah, thank you very much for all of your support and love. And I kind of thought what would be cool for like this live video is a few things. First of all, I would just kind of introduce myself a little bit for those of you who are new here, but also answer some questions that I've had recently, especially over like the last month or so, of just general questions mainly about Chicago. I've had questions about. And then also what I thought would be fun is, hang on, I just wrote it down because I've got like a little notes thing because I'm prepared. I also went on ChatGPT and I asked ChatGPT to give me the most commonly asked questions about Chicago. And then I would answer them myself, but as an expat, as a British person who's lived around the world and now is living in Chicago, because I think my perspective is probably a little different. But yeah, I thought that'd be fun today. So, hi, for those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Katie. I am obviously from the UK, and I'm actually a primary school teacher. So I trained as a primary school teacher in the UK. I actually went to Brighton University, which is down the south of the UK, and then very quickly decided that teaching in England wasn't for me. And my husband and I moved over to China. We worked in a city. I say little, it's not little at all. It's a big city called Tianjin, just outside of Beijing. I worked at a school there for 2 years. And then we moved over to Thailand and we worked at a school in Bangkok for 4 years. And then we moved here to Chicago, and I've been working here since last year. And it's been fun working internationally. I think you get a lot of experiences. My husband is able to come and travel with me, but also he runs a travel blog and a travel YouTube channel. And actually, I say that, I should probably mention it. So he runs a website called Creative Travel Guide, and the YouTube channel, if you want some more Christmas travel tips after this live, not right now, but after this live, you can go and check out we have like a whole ultimate Christmas travel guide video going up like just now. And we just share lots of like travel tips and guides, and it's my voice, so you will recognize that. But we love travel a lot, and we love sharing what we learn when we travel, and that's kind of the place that we do it in. So yeah, he's able to move around with me and run that, and we run that together, and it's a fun little like, it started off as a hobby and now it's kind of a business, which is great. So that's a little backstory about me, and that's how I ended up in Chicago. So I'm working at an international school. It's a British company, so they do all the visa stuff and sort all that out for me. And me being in America is completely tied to my job. That was a question I've had a few times. It's like, how do I get to live here? I'm only living here because of the job I have. It's not like a pathway to a green card or anything like that. Like, it's just a working visa for this job. And then if I left this job, I wouldn't be able to stay here and be here anymore. It's completely like tied together. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And then answering some questions that I've had recently. So I have a list of some questions, and they're a little random, so bear with me. So one of the questions I actually had a few times on my videos from last year were the fireworks for New Year's Eve for New Year's Eve in Chicago. So there are fireworks for New Year's Eve, and they run along Lower Wacker Drive. So a few people asked me questions about where they are. If you go to the main river that leads to Navy Pier, it is along all of those bridges that lead to Navy Pier. And a lot of people walk up to the pier itself because that's where a lot of the fireworks are. But where we saw it, and there is a video on my channel where you can see the view that we had last year, we actually went to like North Clark Street Bridge, like that little bridge that crosses, and we were on the south side of the bridge. You can't stand on the bridge though. So those of you who are interested in going but wanted to like visit, you can't stand on the bridge. And there is a projection on, like, I never remember the name of the building, but there's a huge building at the very end of that like stream. If this is Navy Pier and it's this side here, there's a big building. There's like a projection of a countdown, but the fireworks don't happen up there. They're further down. So from like North Clark Street and Dearborn bridges, like those bridges onwards towards Navy Pier, that's where the fireworks are. So if you are heading for the fireworks in Chicago, that's where they are. Wow. So I've had a few questions about cost of living. I actually know one of my friends is talking about wanting to move over here in the future and was asking me a lot about cost of living. So I kind of wanted to give it a bit of a breakdown because I feel like it's something that as a British person and also just as an international teacher, it's always something we want to know. Cost of living massively varies on where you are. So I have a friend that lives down in Houston, and her cost of living is very different to mine. When we have traveled and visited like Ohio is so much cheaper than Illinois, and Chicago is so much more expensive than other places in Illinois as well. So like, to give you a breakdown of Chicago and the cost of living in Chicago, you can get yourself like a 1-bedroom apartment from $1,800, $2,000, all the way up to like $3,000 if you're looking for a 2-bed. Like, it is expensive to live in Chicago. And your best bet is to look for places like in the neighborhoods. So like, we actually live near West Loop. So it's not too far from downtown. It's not too far from my school. And it is expensive to live in this area, but it's just for convenience. That's where we live. But there's definitely cheaper places if you look further outside of the downtown area. And I know like Wicker Park and places near Wrigley, for example, those can be a little more affordable, and that you don't get as many like high-rise apartments, but you can get a better deal and a bigger space for a bit more money. So really do look around if you are coming here, but it is expensive. And like, even to, I'll actually have a look. Like, I find the biggest thing here that I was shocked with, because we came to America like 10 years ago and did like a big summer trip around America. So it's not like we weren't used to the prices here, but I'm just going to give you an example. So like, I'm going to go on Instacart. Obviously everything is closed, but let me jump on. So just as an example of kind of prices, candy canes come up. You can get, to be fair, candy here is hit or miss, but sometimes you can get stuff really cheap. Like, I love these things. Has anyone ever tried these? They're amazing. My friend when I was younger, Helen, her mum, used to have them all the time, and they're amazing. But you can only they're like $2.69, which is great. That wasn't the cost of living example I want to give you. Here's an example that I'm always like, Hellmann's mayonnaise, $6.99. Who spends $6.99 on mayonnaise? So it is expensive. And, you know, if you're going out for a drink here in Chicago, you're lucky to get yourself a pint for under $7, $8. And if you're going out for a meal, we do eat, we do have takeaways sometimes, and we do go and get food. We don't eat out that often. We tend to go to like drinks before an event, and we might like share an appetizer, because the portions are quite big here. But when you're doing like a takeaway, like if we order Wendy's, for example, Wendy's is my like go-to. If we've been out and had a night out and I really want some food on the way back, or like if we go to wrestling in like Chicago and we're ordering something in, we'll order a Wendy's, and like a meal for two people, like burger, chips, don't even include a drink, you know, just a burger, chips, maybe some nuggets, is easily $50, easily. And like, that's crazy for me. So yeah, cost of living can be expensive. And I think it's definitely something to consider when you're moving to the city and just moving to America in general, because we watch people down in Florida, and we actually went to Florida last January for Royal Rumble, and the prices were so much cheaper there, just even at like chain places. So a Chili's or Arby's is a good one. Arby's in Ohio, when we did our road trip, was so much more affordable than it is here in Chicago. Like crazy difference. Something there that was like $3, $4 is like $10 here. Like it really does. It's a big jump. So that is something to be aware of, especially if you're going to like the cities like Chicago. So that's the cost of living. Another question I get often is how cold is it and how to cope with it. So the weather is extreme, and actually looking at ChatGPT, that's actually the first question that most people ask is, what is the weather like in Chicago? It is pretty extreme. So the summer is really warm. I use Celsius. I'm sorry, that's all I know. But the weather, like in the summer, you're going to get 25 to 35 degrees Celsius, and it is warm, but there's loads of things to see and do, which is great. There's loads of events, there's loads of food festivals, there's loads of concerts. Like you're sorted. That like in our summer, from kind of April onwards, we were jam-packed with stuff to do because it is so busy. The winter is so cold. Like I can't even describe to you how cold it is. And it's not even that cold yet. Like that's the worrying thing. It gets colder. Like right now it's actually not that bad. Like let me check. So right now it is 2 degrees Celsius, and the wind gusts are up to 10 miles per hour. So that's something to be aware of in Chicago specifically, is that it can be cold, but it can feel even colder because of the weather. So it's 2 degrees, but it feels like 1 because of the wind. It's not too windy today. But there was a time like 2 weeks ago, it was minus 12, but it felt like minus 25, like Celsius, this is because of the wind, which I know it's a windy city, but it does get cold. And I don't know how. I can't give much advice on how to cope with it because I'm still working on it myself. Just a lot of layers. And my biggest like tip for anyone moving here is to get a really thick scarf, but a really long scarf, because then when you're walking, you can like bring it, and it literally is that cold. When I'm walking home, sometimes I have to bring my scarf like up to here. Hi, someone's joined. Hi, if you have a question, you can about living in Chicago or anything, pop it in the chat. But yeah, my biggest tip is like, if you have a scarf, like pop it up to your nose, get a hoodie that's like thick with like, you know, as much protection as you can. And like I will end up walking along like home with just this bit coming out, just because it is so cold sometimes. And also just, it sounds awful, avoid going out when there's a certain stage. Last year, I was told that apparently it was a mild winter. It was not a mild winter. It was freezing. We literally had icicles like coming from our window, like on the inside of our window. And everyone was like, oh, it's mild. It was not mild. It is meant to be colder this year, which I'm not excited for. But last year, there was a day where you weren't allowed out. Like you were allowed out, but they told you shouldn't go out for more than like 5 minutes at a time because otherwise you might get frostbite. They weren't lying. Like, we went out. We were like, let's just have a go and go out. We literally had like frostbite on our eyelashes, and like it was our eyebrows, eyelashes everywhere. It was cold. So yeah, I don't know how to deal with the cold, clearly. But the summer's beautiful. Like, the summer is really nice. It does rain a little bit, but generally speaking, the summer's lovely. The winter, get all those layers on. Try to avoid having to walk for too long in the cold. I actually quite like it. Like, I walk to and from work most days, and even when it's really cold, once you get moving, it's not too bad. It's just that wind. Like, there's like a it's like a road on my way to work that it's like a wind like tunnel, I swear. And like, I just kind of power walk down it because it can get like, you literally can be blown away. It's like the winds can really pick up sometimes. But yeah, that's my tips on surviving the cold. It's not. Oh, another one actually though. Callum got me for Christmas last year was hand warmers. They are great. You slip them in your pockets. They're really good when I'm on like duty and it's really cold, but we're still going out. They're just really nice to keep yourself warm, especially because that's the first thing I notice. That's the first thing that gets cold for me is my hands. So keeping them warm is essential. Okay, other questions I've had about living in Chicago or just America in general, how to get a driving license. So yeah, like, it's kind of complicated because it's not quite the same as in England. And you can, if you're visiting America and you're here for a short period of time, you can just use your own driving license. I would recommend getting an international driving license from like in the UK, you can get one from the post office. I think I got mine before we came here. It was like a fiver. So you can definitely get like a driving license, like an international license before you come. But if you're moving here and you're here for longer than like a few months, you will need to get an American driving license just because it's what you need to get around, and it will help you with your insurance and stuff like that. So for your driving license, if you're new to the country, you will need to go to one of the main offices. Like in Chicago, there's one in the downtown area, but it is one of the driving offices where you do your theory test first. So you need to jump. You can just rock up. Like, you don't need to book in advance. You can just show up and ask to do your theory test. And there's loads of practice questions online. Definitely check it because obviously the rules here are very different. Well, they're not very different. I took my driving test and passed the first time here, but I obviously drove in the UK. The theory test is very similar to the theory test in the UK, but you will need to practice beforehand because there's some questions that are a little different. So there'll be some questions that are like, you'll need to know exact miles per hour for certain like stoppage times and things like that. There's certain rules here that aren't the same obviously in England, so you'll need to like revise before you do all of that type of stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, you can do your test. You do your theory test. Once you get that, you can then book your practical test. So it is kind of similar to the UK, but you don't need to book your theory test in advance. You just rock up. Here, what I would recommend if you're new to driving in America, what I did is I did my theory test and passed, and then I did one driving lesson with an instructor here. And I just said to them, look, because a lot of people here learn when they're at school. So a lot of these instructors are used to having like younger clients. So I just said to them, look, I've been driving in the UK for 10 plus years. I want to get my license here, but I haven't driven in America before. I don't know all the rules or whatever. Can you help me? So I literally had like an hour and a half driving lesson with that person. They drove me around Chicago, like, well, I drove around Chicago. They taught me some of the rules of like when you can turn right, because that's kind of confusing, right? There's certain rules when you can turn right. He taught me the golden rule of like when there's a stop sign, you have to do a complete stop so that you kind of sway back a little bit and it's not a rolling stop. Just like things that in the test they'll be a bit, picky about. So I did that just to get my confidence up because I'd never driven in America before. And so I did that for an hour and a half. And then when I booked my test, I met up with my instructor like an hour before I did my test. And she just drove me. The test is really easy. It's like 10 minutes, if that. But where we were, it was just on the outskirts of Chicago. And you literally just drove around. You came out of the test center, you turned right, you literally did a square, and then you came back, and then you parked. You showed that you could pull in. There was no like reverse park. There was no like 3-point turn. There was like none of the maneuvers that you do in your UK test. It was literally, here is a space. Can you pull up into it head first? Which is what I did, obviously. So yeah, that's how I would recommend doing your test if you're a little nervous, is have a quick practice one first. And I can't remember the company. I felt bad. I should really know the company I used. If I will find out the company and leave it in the description after this. But they were really good, and they were really understanding, and they were really fair. Like, they didn't overcharge me. They charged me what they would charge, for a test, and they were nice. So yeah, that's how you can get a driving license. Other questions, wrestling. So what's next for wrestling? So some of you might be here because I obviously have been posting a lot of wrestling stuff this year. Me and my husband love wrestling. We really got into it during the pandemic, and this year we've been really fortunate. We went to our first WrestleMania, which was so exciting. We went to SummerSlam. We got to meet some amazing people. Like, we met The Undertaker and Kane. We met the Dudley Boys. Like, it's been a great year for wrestling, and we've done some really cool events. So I like the question, what's next for wrestling? We will be doing some wrestling next year. Not me, I won't personally be doing wrestling. I will be going to some wrestling next year. What wrestling? I don't know. Sorry, if you are new, just joining, then I'm doing a little Q&A of life in Chicago and life in the USA as a British person. So if you have any questions, do pop them in the chat. But yeah, someone said about, what wrestling stuff am I going to do next? We have some stuff planned, but I don't want to say it out loud yet because it's not like confirmed to the extent. So obviously, like, Royal Rumble is not far from us, and WrestleMania is over in Vegas, and we would love to do both. I'm not saying we're definitely doing it yet, just because not everything is booked and sorted for it. And to be honest, if you are a wrestling fan and you have seen those ticket prices recently, it is disgraceful. I am like so shocked. And in fact, the WWE holiday tour is coming to Chicago. I think it's on the 29th of December, and the tickets are extortionate. And you can go and get like last minute, like, when I say last minute, we actually had a look yesterday, and you can get like the top tier section for like $30, but being at Rosemont and how far that is not actually in Chicago, it's just, for us, it's just not worth it. But I'm sure when WWE comes to Chicago, I'm sure we'll be seeing them as much as we can. I'm not sure about AEW. I know last year we did do AEW twice, actually. Did we do it twice? We did it. I definitely did it once because we got tickets on the ramp, which were amazing. And if we can get good seats like on the ramp, then it's definitely worth going. I'll be honest, I'm not feeling AEW at the moment, so I'm not sure. If TNA come back, because we did like front row ramp seats last year, and it was incredible. Like, it was my favorite wrestling experience other than WrestleMania. So if they come back, we'll definitely do that. But yeah, so that's the plan for wrestling. There is a few things coming up, but I don't want to confirm it. But we will be doing some wrestling stuff, don't worry. And then another question that I do get quite a lot, more so on my like Instagram. So my Instagram, if you're not following on Instagram, it's just KTO Vlogs. I post on there occasionally. My New Year's resolution is to post on there more often. Maybe I should do like a daily video on there. Should we say that? It is just KTO Vlogs though. So head over there. But a question I often get on there is about international teaching and how do you get into international teaching. And I have got a video on this channel about international teaching that I did a year or so ago. And to be honest, if you are a qualified teacher, then you will have no problems getting some type of international teaching job. Like, I think there's so many international schools popping up all over the world that if you are not picky about where you're going, you'll easily get into it. And I think that's the key, is that there are certain places, like when I first started teaching, my first international teaching job was also my NQT year. And I was never going to get a job in like America or the UAE or, anywhere in Europe as an NQT, because I just didn't have the experience, and those are more desirable places. But in places like, like I went to China, and there's so many jobs that come up in China every year because there's so many schools, but it's also not as desirable to some people. And I think finding places like China, Saudi is a great place at the moment because the wage is really good, but also there's more and more schools popping up. Dubai obviously has loads of schools popping up as well. Like those types of places, apply for everywhere that you're interested in, but applying for places and keeping an open mind and doing your first, your 2-year contract somewhere and gaining that experience at an international school and then using it as a stepping stone to get to your desired location is definitely the way to do it. So for us, we did want to go to Thailand, and when we first, wanted to move abroad, we wanted to go to Thailand. And because I was an NQT, I wanted to go to a good school that would support my NQT. And the school that I wanted to go to were hiring a load of people at the time, and they just didn't have the capacity to take on an NQT student, like NQT teacher. So I ended up going to China. We had 2 great years traveling the country. It was a very much unique experience. Like, I'm proud to say that we lived in China for 2 years. And then after I did my NQT, I had the qualifications and the knowledge and understanding and experience to then move on to our, desired location. So that's kind of just for international teaching. Look at TESS, the website TESS, all of the jobs that are posted on the international section there. Get applying, be open-minded, show that you're proactive and engaging. And in international schools, it's all about building the community and really like working with parents and going to, school events and really pushing that. So that's my tip for international teaching. So those are the main questions that I've been asked kind of over the last few weeks and months. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments. If you want to say hi, pop them in the comments. Hi. But yeah, so that's just kind of questions that I've been asked. And then I just wanted to respond. So I thought it'd be fun. On ChatGPT, they have what are the most commonly asked questions about living in Chicago. So I thought I'd run through them and just answer them myself. So the first one was, what is the weather like? So we have already talked about that, but extreme. It's hot in the summer. There's plenty of things to do though. In the winter, it's cold. It does get down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. And there are days, like last year we had a snow day. We also had a day where we were told not to go out for too long or else we get frostbite. You will have, it does snow a lot here. It snowed a few times already this year. And obviously January and February are colder. Other questions. So how does public transport in the Chicago compare to, oh, hi, Todd. Merry Christmas. Thank you for all your comments as well, Todd. I really appreciate all of your support, especially over Vlogmas. How does public transport in Chicago compare to the UK? So that's a good question from ChatGPT. Thanks. But in Chicago, you have plenty of buses and L trains across the city. So you can get across most of the city using the buses and the L trains. And then if you want to go further afield, you can use Lyft or Uber to go to places further away. So we always go to places like Rosemont is not too far from the airport, and it's where the WWE events always happen, in Rosemont Arena. So we always travel there, and we have to you can get a train to Rosemont and then get a taxi from there. We just find it easier to get a taxi from here. But in comparison to London, so me and my husband are from south of London, so we often visited London. So that's kind of where I'm comparing this to, is just that there are buses and trains in Chicago, but it isn't as extensive as the underground in London. It doesn't get you to as many places, I find, but it does get you to most places that you'll want to be in, especially if you're here as a visitor and you're staying in the downtown area. There's trains that will get you to Wrigley. There's trains that will get you to White Sox. There's, if you're in the downtown area, you can get to everything else by, walking pretty easily. And there's also the scooters and the bike sharing programs here as well. So what neighborhoods are popular among expats? That's a good one. So Lakeview, Lincoln Park, and West Loop are kind of the popular areas to be in. I think there's lots of expats in those areas, and there's lots of apartments in those areas. Wicker Park is also a good place, but it's more kind of, homes and houses and where people might purchase a house, or where they might like, you get bigger spaces, but it's not big apartment buildings. All of those kind of areas are safer, I would say, and they have like more going on. Like there's more kind of restaurants and bars and stuff going on in general. If you're moving here, the only thing to really be aware of is just when you're moving into an apartment, look for apartments that don't need like a credit check and will accept like a guarantor. So for us, when we moved here, we couldn't do a credit check because we had no like USA credit history. So we ended up having like my school was our guarantor. So that's the only thing to kind of be aware of if you're moving here, is just what apartments offer that. And once you've been here, like after 6 months, you can build up a credit history pretty quickly and get a good credit score, like a decent credit score anyway. But it's just something to be aware of when you're moving here. Other questions, what's the cost of living? Obviously, I mentioned that before. It is high in Chicago, and it's weird. There's actually the cost of living in Chicago. It is cheaper than London, for example. London is extortionate in the way of like renting places. So it is cheaper than like London or New York, for example, but it is still expensive. I find it's expensive. And, if you're getting a Lyft or Uber, 10, 15-minute journey is going to cost you around $10, $15. Instacart, obviously I showed you before, like a pint of milk is like $2. You can't really get much on Instacart for less than $2. Like it doesn't happen. So yeah, cost of living varies, but it is expensive in Chicago. If you're moving to America and you have a choice of where to move to, obviously I have to live in Chicago. That's where my job is. But if you're moving to America and you have a choice of where to go, I would definitely suggest looking at some of the states that are cheaper, because I just think like the cost of living in Illinois in general is quite high. And I think compared to places like Texas and Florida, those places, when we've traveled, those seem to be much cheaper. Okay, so another question, do I need a car in Chicago? So someone asked me this before as well, actually. It depends on what you want to do. So we don't have a car in Chicago because public transport, you can get around the city pretty easily. A car can be helpful if you want to visit the suburbs, or if you plan on living in the suburbs, because getting around in the suburbs is a little harder, and there's not as much transit outside of the city. But if you're living in the city, and I'm not just talking about downtown, I'm on about like the neighborhoods around downtown as well, you can get around fairly easily. And Chicago, like the L trains do expand the whole kind of Chicago land area. They call it Chicago land. I'm not just making that up. They do kind of expand that whole area. So you don't need a car. If we were to stay here for the next 5-10 years, we probably would get a car, but I don't think that's going to be the plan. But so you can get a car, but I will say parking in Chicago in general is expensive and hard. If you're living on the outskirts, having a car is ideal if you have, your own house and you've somewhere to park it up. But if you're in the downtown area, I just don't think you need it. I would recommend still getting your driving license though, because the road trips here are awesome. Like that's one of my favorite things. And maybe that should be it. I guess I should probably answer that. One of my favorite things about living in America as a British person in general is just how awesome the road trips are. So here, like America's just so big. Like that's the top of the bottom of it. Is that hi, by the way, if you're just joining us, thank you for joining. Merry Christmas. If you want to drop a comment or a question in the chat, you're more than welcome to. But I'm just doing a little Chicago living in America FAQ. But yeah, so you don't need a car if you're living in downtown Chicago, but the road trips in America are awesome. So like in England, you can drive from where we live in England, you can drive for like 4 or 5 hours and end up in France, which is awesome. But in America, like we can drive 4 or 5 hours and we've barely left the state. So like it's just so big. And we have had 2 incredible road trips that I feel really fortunate to have been able to do. So we drove all the way to Philadelphia in April for WrestleMania. And part of that trip was like stopping in I say obscure places, and I don't mean to offend anyone in America by saying they're obscure. It's obscure for people from the UK because we would go, if we were flying from England, we would visit places like New York, Vegas, LA, Florida, maybe Chicago. But like we were able to visit places like Pittsburgh. We went to Lancaster and saw like the Amish community there. And it was so different to what we're used to, but it was so interesting and I really enjoyed it. We just had a great trip. Like we went to the Ohio State Penitentiary, so fascinating. And then our second trip this year, we drove over to Cleveland in Ohio for SummerSlam. We got to visit places like Cincinnati. Again, I mean, there's a theme to these road trips. We went to Berlin, which is also an Amish community. And yeah, we've had some really cool road trips. And yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things about living here is just the road trips are great. Okay, so another question. How do the people of Chicago view British people? That's interesting. I have never had any problems. I don't really know what that means. Everyone's very friendly. Like I will say, I've said this in one of my videos before. With people in Chicago, you don't get someone in the middle. You can get someone that's really busy and frustrated with their day, and that happens. And they won't be rude to you. They'll just keep themselves to themselves, which is fine. And especially like if I'm walking to work and people are like I say running, they're just faster than me, walking around like Union Station, trying to get in and out and stuff. Like it can feel overwhelming and people can kind of come across a little rude. They're not being rude. They're just on their way to work. But generally speaking, and coming from someone who often gets lifts and Ubers, as soon as they hear the British accent, a lot of people have questions. I have a lot of conversations with people about football or soccer, as you call it here, but like English football, food in the UK, and then just general things of Europe. So yeah, I guess most people, as soon as they hear the accent, they want to have a conversation about the UK and just kind of what my thoughts are. And it's really funny, actually. Often people talk to me about football or whatever, and they'll be like, so what do you think of America? Like they just generally want to know what I think of the country and stuff, which is interesting. Like I always think the accent's always a good, always sparks conversation, shall we say. Okay, other questions. Let me have a look, sorry. So are British products available in Chicago? So yeah, I mean, you can definitely get British products here in Chicago. I haven't really felt the need to. So I call it Aldi, some people call it Aldi, call it what you want, but we always do our shopping from there and they do have British stuff there that's like similar brands, for example, but we don't tend to feel the need to do any kind of we've lived in Asia for 6 years beforehand, so we don't seek out certain brands and certain products, but you can definitely get that type of stuff. So yeah, you can get British products, and there's a store called World Market, and you can definitely get like British teas and stuff like that there, but we don't really feel the need to. How do I meet people in Chicago? So that's a good question. If you're new to Chicago, it can be kind of daunting to meet people. For me, I obviously work at a school, so I meet lots of people there. And other than that, there's lots of Facebook pages. So, and also a lot of like our apartment building does a lot of like events and meetups. I'll be honest, I don't go to them. I'm not that social, but they do that. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about how to meet people. But there's definitely like networking events and expat groups and book clubs and sports and stuff like that. There's like gyms and like dance classes and stuff that you can meet people with and stuff as well. But for me, like there's a Facebook page called, I think it's just called the Chicago Girls Group. And it just has a load of women on there who live in Chicago who share tips and advice on living here and just like chat and stuff. And I find that really helpful. Like things like, when we first moved here, I didn't know that you can't park on the road if it could snow. I didn't realize that, and the car would just be towed, which is good to know when you are new to the country and new to the city, because I didn't know that was a rule here. But yeah, so joining Facebook groups is always helpful when you first move here. What is the food scene like in Chicago? So Chicago is known for its food, and I would definitely recommend if you're coming to Chicago to eat as much local food as you can. Obviously, Chicago is known for its deep dish pizza, but that's a whole controversy thing. So there's deep dish pizza, which I also love, and I am a Illuminati's girl, or Gino's East. Both of them equally great. But you also have tavern pizza, and there's a place called Beggar's Pizza, which has really good tavern pizza, and that's what the locals eat. So don't get in a conversation with people about pizza. They get the locals do get very protective of their tavern pizza because they believe that's better than the deep dish. I like both. I like pizza. Also, you have like your Italian beef sandwiches. There's a place called Luke's. That's always, they have an Al's beef, also good. Luke's also does hot dogs. So you have Chicago hot dogs. I'm not a great fan. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Chicago hot dog. We actually had one. My first one was at White Sox, which probably wasn't the best experience, but it was decent. But like, I'm just not a fan of it. Callum loves it. I'm not a massive fan. But you can get all types of food here. There's some great brunch places. There's a place not far from us called, what is it called? Lou Mitchell's or Louis Mitchell's. But it's like a brunch place. It was like one of the original brunch spots on Route 66. So you can get some really cool, like, historic brunch places and some diners as well. There's a place called Timeout Market in the West Loop that has lots of international food and stuff. So that's really cool as well. So there's plenty of like food options to choose from whilst you're here. What's the sports culture like in Chicago? There is a lot of sports here. They're not great. I'm going to be honest. Like, we love the sports. Like, we'll go to the sports. The atmosphere is great. The actual teams themselves aren't amazing. White Sox, for example. I absolutely love going to White Sox. If you told me I could only ever go to one sport in Chicago ever again, I'd choose White Sox because the people there are so friendly. The stadium is really nice, like where it is. Like, the ballpark is really nice. And it's also always pretty quiet. So we can just find a little space. Like, we have a little area by a bar that we stand at all the time. So it doesn't matter what seat we buy, we never sit in it. We just stand at this little bar bit and then watch the game from there. The food is really tasty there. There's lots of like really cool stuff. Last season they had, what was it called? It was like a milkshake that was incredible. It's in a vlog. I will try and leave the link in the description. But it was like a campsite, I don't know, some type of milkshake that had a s'mores thing on top, and it was meant to be like a campfire milkshake or something like that. It was incredible. So they have great food, and I love White Sox, but the actual team suck. Like, I think they had a record like this season for like the most losses in a row or something ridiculous. But the atmosphere is great. And then over at United Center, you have the basketball team, which is the Bulls, and then you have Blackhawks, which is ice hockey. Again, both of them are hit and miss. We have seen both teams. I actually enjoyed the basketball more than I enjoyed the ice hockey, and I didn't think that would be the case. But the Bulls games are really good fun. There's lots going on. There's like a donut race, which is great. Like, there's just so much happening there. So I really enjoy going to the Bulls games. And if you wait until the day of like a Bulls game, you can get pretty decently priced tickets, like in the heavens. Ice hockey, I enjoyed ice hockey. Again, I personally think that the prices for like ice hockey is overpriced. Same for the Bears. But we do go to them occasionally, and they're good fun. And then the NFL team here is Chicago Bears. They actually have their last game tomorrow, and there is absolutely no hope in hell that they're winning, that they're going anywhere with it. So yeah, they're not. Chicago have lots of great sports. None of the teams are that good, but there's good atmosphere. So it's definitely worth going to if you are around because they're good fun. So last two things. One of the questions was, how do you cope with homesickness? So I'll be honest, we have lived abroad. This is our 8th year abroad now. So we are pretty on it with the homesickness. Like, we've worked out how to kind of like just stay positive, and we've kind of used that kind of distance now. If you're joining, by the way, I've got 2 more questions and I'm going to wrap up. So if you do have any questions you want to ask or any comments, then just leave them in the chat. But yeah, how do you do with homesickness? It's just staying connected with friends and family. So we spent our morning on Christmas Eve Skyping our parents, And then, you know, it's Christmas Day today. We make sure we contact them. We send videos. I won't show it to you, but I've got a younger brother, and he has the cutest child. She's just adorable. So I get little videos. And my dad is over there. Like my parents were over there this morning, and my dad was like, "Here's a picture. She's got your gift," and yeah, just stuff like that. It's really nice. Like just keeping in contact like that. And that's for me, like, because she's like my first niece, and she's really young. I saw her last summer, and she's just so adorable. That's kind of the hardest part. Is I'm like, oh, she's gonna get older before I get home, like it's things like that. But yeah, I mean, you know, we just stay in contact with parents and family as much as we can, and then like yeah, I mean, other than that, like we've been abroad now for some time. I think when we first moved abroad in China, one of the things we did was like have like a like British food whenever we could, just because it's weird. Like when you move to another country, you don't realize like how everything changes. Like every element of your life changes, and it's not just like where you're living, but it's your weather, it's your family are on different time zones. And China was really hard because you had the Great Firewall. So like WhatsApp would go down all the time, and you'd have to use like a VPN to like contact people, and like it was really hard actually China, like getting used to homesickness and stuff. But yeah, you get used to it. Kind of finding things that remind you of home is good as well. Like in Chicago, where is it we went to? There's an Irish bar. I don't know what it's called. Is that Red? There is a place called the Red Lion, and there's a place called the Globe Pub, and both of them are like kind of British vibes. Where did we go? Oh, Elephant and Castle. I can't believe I forgot the name of that. There's two Elephant and Castles, and both of them are great. And we went there for St. Patrick's Day. They're great fun. But yeah, finding little places like that that kind of remind you of home is also a nice way to like cope with homesickness. And then, so the big differences, the last question is just like, what are the big differences between living in Chicago and living in the UK? And I'm just going to throw a little caveat in there of like living in Asia. So my big differences here compared to like living elsewhere in the world, just like things like, I mean, the weather is so extreme here. And it was kind of extreme in China, but not extreme as it is in Chicago. There is a place called Harbin in China that has an ice festival. It wasn't as cold as this. Chicago should have an ice festival. I think that should be something that comes into this, because it gets cold enough, I'm sure. Things like the tipping culture here is different to like England or Asia. Like, I mean, to be honest, in Asia, we always tip, but it's not part of the culture. In England, you would like leave your change. Here, it's like this is the percentage that you tip. And like if you spent $100, you are tipping $20. You know, like that's a big difference. Like that's not something that we're used to in the UK. Driving on the right side, that is also something that took a little while to adjust. Luckily, I adjusted quite quickly, but it is something to adjust to. I'm trying to think of like random stuff. When you go out to restaurants, portion sizes are huge. Don't over order. That was something that we realized when we first moved here, like when we first traveled here, even 10 years ago, is we didn't know what to have for a main. So we ordered like a nacho dish. It was in Margaritaville in Vegas. I have a very specific memory of this. If you're in Vegas, go to Margaritaville. I will be going there next time I'm in Vegas. But they have a nachos dish. And we were like, oh, we'll order that for a starter whilst we tried to decide our mains. We did not get through any of them. Like we didn't get through it all, and we were full quite quickly. So yeah, large portions is something to be aware of. Obviously, the weather's different. Healthcare is something to be aware of. Like in the UK, obviously we have the NHS, which is the free healthcare, whereas here it is all private. So if you're like my school have like a health, I mean I pay for it, but my school pays some of it. I think I don't really understand healthcare here. I haven't, luckily, touch wood, I haven't needed to use it, and I don't intend to use it anytime soon. But yeah, it's all paid for here, so you need to make sure that you are fully insured and you have a healthcare plan and all that stuff, which is not something that we used to doing that in the UK. So that's a big difference, I guess. And I think other than that, like you get similarities as well. So everyone is just as kind of friendly, you know, with each other. You'll have times where you meet people that are, just as friendly as, I don't know how to describe it really. In Thailand, everyone, like people who lived in Thailand, like locals, very friendly people, like over the top friendly. In China and in England, most people that you kind of come into contact with who are working are friendly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's friendly. That's the same here, like everyone's busy, everyone's got their own thing. I think something that we like here is that, like, and I say, there's a lot of stuff to do here, and there's also a lot of stuff to buy here. And what I mean by that is, like, in Thailand for Christmas, for example, we never really got each other lots of gifts because a lot of the stuff that we had in Thailand was experiences. Like, our gifts would be we'd go into Hua Hin in a villa or somewhere or whatever. Whereas here, it's a bit more materialistic, which I don't necessarily say it as a bad thing. It's just there's more things here that you can get. So yeah, I guess that's something that we kind of like here. But I think those are kind of the big differences. And I think living in Chicago is definitely an experience. And if you can, whether it's in America or anywhere in the world, I would highly recommend just living somewhere new, even if it's for a year, even if it's for 3 months, even if it's for 6 weeks. I would definitely recommend just getting, not just to travel, but to get an experience really living somewhere else, because and this isn't me preaching, I appreciate it sounds like it, it's really not. I feel like I've learned so much living abroad, and you just learn so much about different cultures and different people living abroad as well, that it's interesting. But yeah, thank you anyway for watching, and for those of you that have kind of come along and said, and thanks Todd for wishing me Merry Christmas to you too. And I just think, it's a lovely time of the year. It's a busy one. If you have made it this far and you're still watching, please let me know in the comments of just like any videos that you want to see of Chicago, anything like daily life stuff that you want to see, anything travel wise you want to see, or wrestling. I think we are talking about doing like a wrestling channel in the future, because obviously wrestling, we love it. So maybe that's something that we can start in 2025. But yeah, if there's any videos you want to see in 2025, anything that you want to, any like daily life stuff or Chicago tips or anything like that, let me know and we will work on it. And I just want to say thank you so much for everyone's love and support. And I am very proud that I've uploaded daily for Vlogmas. It's always a challenge with a full-time job, but I'm so glad that I've done it. And yeah, thank you for everyone's love and support with that. And I wish everyone a very, very Merry Christmas. I hope you all have some delicious food and some wonderful gifts. And on that note, I'm going to wish you all a Merry Christmas and start cooking my spiral pineapple ham, because that is our Christmas dinner today. And it takes like 2.5 hours. So I better start preparing everything. So thank you so much. And I shall wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I shall see you very soon. Bye, guys.